Good evening. We'll call to order the City of Brandon Planning Commission meeting for Wednesday, June 16th, 2021. And I will start with a roll call, and I see all commissioners present. The second thing would be an adoption of the agenda, which I would entertain a motion.
I'll move.
Measure, and who is the seconder? Anderson. All those in favor of the agenda? Carries. And then for the minutes of the last meeting, oh, Commissioner Anderson again. Yep, oh, right, thank you. Any changes to the minutes? All those in favor of the minutes, then it's approved. Thank you. So we'll move on to the public hearing portion. We have 3 items this evening. The first 2 are conditional uses, and I believe we have 3. And the final one is the Southeast Brandon Secondary Plan. I want to thank everybody who's online tonight, either watching on YouTube or taking part through Teams, for your participation. When we do go through each one, we'll see a presentation from the council, perhaps comments or presentation from the applicant if there is one, and then we open up for comments either in opposition or in favor or seeking more information. That would be the time for the public to comment. I would encourage everyone to listen to everybody's comments, and to, if you're later in line in the comments, to add something new to the comments, or to at least say I add my voice to the earlier comments. And I'd also like to raise something. We are trying to keep it to 5 minutes per presenter, and so we want to make sure that everybody gets every idea out on the floor. Once we end the consultation, the public hearing portion for each item, we will then have our discussion and make our decision. So with that, I think I will kick you over to administration for the first item.
Thank you, and good evening, Mr. Chair. So, first item is a conditional use application for 38 on 16th Street. I will wait a moment until the slides show up on screen. There we go. Thank you. So, the subject site is located in the west side of downtown. Let me just adjust the microphone, make sure people can hear me better. Sorry about that. Moving in more closely, it is at the northwest corner of the intersection of Rosser Avenue and 16th Street. So you see it highlighted in the yellow rectangle there. This is the site as shown as viewed from the east side, so from 16th Street. And this is the south view, so facing, so looking from Rosser Avenue. And this is the view of the back lane on the west side of the site, so between 16th and 17th Street. These are just a few snapshots of the surrounding area, surrounding the site, along Rosser as well as 16th and 17th Streets. So the request we are dealing with tonight is a conditional use application, and it's to allow for multiple residential units with dwelling units on the first story adjacent to a commercial corridor as identified in the Downtown Brandon Secondary Plan. This is the site plan. Given the size, unfortunately we cannot zoom in closer, but for context, the proposed building contains 8 dwelling units, 4 stories, and will be on the eastern half of this site, so closest to 16th Street over here. This is Rosser Avenue. And there will be a parking lot with 10 parking spaces off the back, access from the lane. This is a rendering of the proposed building viewed from the intersection of 16th and Rosser. As I mentioned earlier, it's a 4-story tall building. And this is a view from the southwest side, the southwest side of the site in question. With respect to our analysis, the site is located in a few blocks where the residential use is predominant along the north side of Rosser Avenue, with commercial mostly along the south side of Rosser. Given the mixed-use nature of the surrounding area and the site being adjacent to multiple dwelling buildings, the proposal complements the downtown vision in increasing the number of residents living downtown. The developer is proposing 10 parking spaces on site, more than the minimum 8 required under the zoning bylaw, to address potential parking concerns. Although the proposed building of 4 stories is higher than the adjacent single detached dwelling at 32 on 16th Street, considering the limited exposure of windows and no balconies facing the north, the development will have minimal impact on the existing neighbors' privacy. The proposed development complies with all applicable provisions in the development plan, the downtown Brandon secondary plan, and the zoning bylaw provisions. Based on the feedback we received from the commenting agencies, we are recommending a condition of approval that the owner, concurrently with a development permit, remove the existing access and approach, including a portion of the shared approach with 32 16th Street, and restoring the approach flare and boulevard. Again, the rationale is the driveway is off the front, but the parking is proposed to be off the rear only, so there's no need for a front driveway access anymore. In terms of public outreach, the applicant reached out to nearby property owners by mail to inform them of the proposal. One resident did raise concerns about parking in the area, and the applicant discussed the parking concern with this resident. As of closing today, we did not receive any further representation in favor or in opposition to this application. Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, any questions for administration on this point? Go ahead.
Through the chair, just to confirm, so the one residence here will be removed, not both?
Through the chair, that is correct. Only the property at hand, the one to the north, is staying.
Okay.
That is a separate property.
Through the chair, this building will be similar to the one that Evan has on Richmond?
Through the chair to Commissioner Anderson, I believe this one is slightly bigger. The applicant can confirm that. If I recall, the one on Richmond was only 6 units. This is 8 proposed.
Oh, yeah, okay. Another question through the chair. We're not outpricing the downtown, are we? Like if these are for rent, some of the people that live downtown won't be able to afford places like this. Are we stepping on different toes are we trying to move people out, or do you know what I'm trying to say here?
I believe so. Through the chair to Commissioner Anderson, we are not aware of this. Again, the applicant can speak more about how they are apportioning these units, and also, again, there's nothing in our planning legislation that speaks to rental supply specifically.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Any other questions? So I'll just ask for, just for the sake of clarity, the main reason for the conditional use is because of the dwellings on the main floor?
Yes, that is correct, Mr. Chair. Yes, the current policies, current regulations are consistent with the downtown plan, which calls for normally no dwelling units on the main floor because it is a commercial corridor.
Thank you. Do we have the applicant available to speak to this?
The applicant is Kate.
Mackenzie?
Yes.
I don't see her present, but Evan is.
Okay.
Evan Keller? All right. Sorry. For those of you watching, we're just dealing with a separate system to bring people in because of our COVID rules.
To the one on Richmond in terms of quality of build, etc.
Yep.
It is a story taller.
Evan.
Other than that, Darren Gilk is here as well to speak for this application in regards to the community outreach.
Does he not have return audio? Evan, can you hear me? Mr. Keller? No. It's going to make asking him questions difficult.
Are there any questions?
Mr. Keller, we can't seem to get a hold of
Should I
you.
restart?
Do you have to? Can you hear us? Are we on mute?
Yeah, I can repeat what I said there. I guess we're having some technology issues.
Thank you.
I'm just seeing some messages that people are missing what I said.
Thanks.
Yeah, so we basically worked with the city as we usually do to comply with the downtown mixed use zone. We are meeting the density, parking, building setback requirements with this project. The only thing that we're here for conditional use for tonight is the requirement to basically have commercial on the main floors the way it's written up right now. We're requesting to have residential on the main floor. We feel it'll be a better fit in the area. Yeah, as far as that goes, it is similar to the building on Richmond. It is a high quality building, very similar in nature. I think it'll be an improvement to the area. The fact that it's facing Rosser will also be a big plus. So.
Thank you. Commissioners, do you have any questions?
Yeah.
Commissioners, no? Mr. Keller, did you say that Mr. Glick's available to talk briefly to the consultation? Mr. Keller, we didn't have any questions for you. Commissioners, do you have any concerns about the consultation process that you wish to have Mr. Glick present? We've seen his presentations before on the consultations that they do. All right, not hearing any questions from the commissioners. Will it be possible for us to open it up for anyone who wishes to speak in opposition? Do we have anyone on Teams right now that's looking to?
We do have one who has questions about this
Yes.
application.
Is that Coyote
Yes.
Goldjuma? Is he available? Or
Yes. Right?
oh, there. Hello, sir. Can you hear us? Or see us?
Are we muted?
Hello.
Hello, can you hear us?
Hello.
We're just sorting out the microphones. Now can you hear us, sir?
Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah.
Just please state your name and
My name is Kayod, and I live just a house beside this house, this particular apartment. I live on the street, and I live. My house is the second house beside this house. My house is 36, while this house is 38. So 38 is just like a neighbor to me. My concern, I don't really have much concern, but my major concern is that I had the presenter and some of the representatives saying there are no concerns when it comes to parking or when it comes to parking or meeting the city zoning requirements. But my question is, I had one of the representatives saying that they are getting this approval so that an additional apartment can be added to this particular project. My question is, how is adding 2 more apartments to this project? How is that not going to affect the parking system of this environment? For every building project around this street, opposite me, we have several apartment buildings there. Most of these apartment buildings are occupied by students. And even if they are occupied by a mom and a dad, they both have vehicles. And most of those students have vehicles. And yet we are saying we want to add few more apartments to this, want to approve this now so that we can have 2 more extra apartments, meaning we are adding to the density of this environment, either directly or indirectly. So now, if we are saying that this approval does not involve parking, then what is it? What are we talking about then?
Perhaps I can answer that myself, but I'll look across to my colleagues from the city. Sir, the conditional use is because normally a building on that site would require commercial activity on the main floor. So a convenience store or a shoe store or some sort of commercial activity. And they're asking for permission to have 2 apartments instead of commercial space. And so because they also have enough parking for the zoning already, I don't think that adding the 2 apartments, since parking is being provided off street for them, actually will increase the parking problem. Certainly not any more so than having commercial activity happening there that we have less control over the customer parking, really. Does that help your concerns, sir?
I'm trying to use a deductive reasoning now to ask you this particular question. If a commercial outlet is located on the 1st floor of this building, are there no requirements that has to be met with the city when it comes to parking for commercial around this environment? Right? If there are requirements, what are the requirements that need to be met?
Excellent. Thank you.
And now, yeah.
I can get Mr. Mock to address that. You're asking if this hadn't been apartments but had been commercial space, would they have needed more or less parking?
Right, so that's what I understood. Correct me if I'm wrong. But to answer your question, for commercial uses, because this is the downtown mixed-use zone, there are no parking requirements for commercial uses. On the other hand, for dwelling units, there are parking requirements, at least 1 per dwelling unit on property. So by the applicant requesting to build residential units rather than just building commercial on the main floor, in that way they are also mitigating some of the potential parking issues on the street by providing more parking on site for all the units in question on this property.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Mock. Do the commissioners have any other questions for this representation? No? Thank you again for presenting that to us. We have nobody else online or coming in by email or text from the YouTube feed.
Not for this application.
All right. Well, then, if the commissioners don't have any further questions for administration or back to the applicant, I would entertain the motion to close the public hearing.
Darren Glick has his hand up.
Oh, all right. Thanks, Mr. Glick. If you're there. Hi, Mr. Glick.
You'll have to unmute yourself.
All right, are we good?
There we go. Yeah.
Oh, all right, to Commissioner, to the planning commissioners, and to everyone. I spoke directly with the neighbor, and yeah, I think the commercial on the main, we could have built a 5-story building here with commercial on the main and 4 stories above, and only 8 parking spots, and not be here. So we took it upon ourselves to put the extra 2 parking spots in there and keep it to 4 stories. So I just, that point of clarification had been mentioned. And I did talk with the apartment owner across the street. He reached out to me. He welcomes the investment in the neighborhood, as well as the business owner at 1639 and 39 17th Street. And I just wanted to get those points in there, that we could have built a building that could have got around the planning commission hearing process altogether, but we chose to go with the 10 parking spots and not go to the commercial with the 4 stories. I just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, commissioners, any questions now with that added? A motion to close the, Commissioner Anderson, Commissioner Hill? Did you catch that?
Me?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay. That the public hearing for conditional use application C-03-21 at 38 16th Street be concluded.
And that was seconded by Commissioner Hill. All those in favor? So that ends the public hearing portion. So now I would entertain a motion on the application.
I'll do that also.
Excellent.
That conditional use application C-03-21 to allow for the development of a building with 8 dwelling units in the downtown mixed-use zone, with dwelling units on the 1st story adjacent to a commercial corridor as identified in the downtown Brandon secondary plan, be approved at 38 16th Street in accordance with the letter of intent, attachment A1 to A3, and the site plan attachment B3, and elevation plan attachment B4, subject to 1, the owner of successor concurrently with the development permit, removing the site access and approaches, including the portion of the shared approach with 32 16th Street off 16th Street, and restoring the 32 16th Street approach, flare, and boulevard in compliance with the city's standard construction specifications. That's it.
Thank you. Seconded. Question, Richard. Commissioner Anderson, do you wish to speak to that?
This building will look nice there. The house looks like it needs some repairs, and so this will add to revitalization of the downtown area. I'm okay with dwellings on the 1st story because there could be someone living in downtown area that has a walker, wheelchair, whatever, that needs ground floor access maybe. If there's no elevators in this building, I don't know. But I am in favor of this development.
Thank you. Other comments?
Just that it seems appropriate for what else that has gone on down 16th Street. Certainly the area, I believe, will be enhanced by it. Just the residential aspect, period, downtown is a bonus, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Any other comments?
Sorry, just a minor typo. I believe it should say the owner or successor.
Yes, thank you.
Oh,
I think that's how she actually even read it in that
well,
way.
I think I said of successor, or did
Okay.
I say or?
Doesn't matter. It's supposed to be or.
Okay.
Well, and then myself too, again, 16th is, well, it's still in the downtown mixed-use zone. It's off towards the edge, the more residential portion of it. And so I don't have any concern, and especially since they've more than addressed the parking-related consequence of that decision. So if there are no other questions or comments, I'll call the question. All those in favor? That's all 5. Thank you. Mr. Mock, I'd invite you to do the next one, the subdivision. Sorry, I thought it was another conditional use.
No worries. Thank you again, Mr. Chair. So we'll wait for the presentation I see it on our screens here at least. Okay. So the next application we're dealing with is a subdivision application for 3 addresses. They're all adjacent to each other here. So this site is located just west of 18th Street, north of Rosser Avenue, between Rosser Avenue and the CP Railway. And zooming in more closely, we are looking at the northern end of 20th Street at the on the north side of Rosser Avenue, including a site that used to be the Brandon University's physical plant there. So this is a view of the eastern portion of this site, directly from the current end of 20th Street, looking northwards. This is a view of the closed lane, which is now addressed as 21 on 21st Street, viewed westwards from 20th Street. So that physical plant building, or the former physical plant building, is to the right there, you see a bit. And as I mentioned, this is a subdivision application. It's to subdivide these 3 properties, to reconfigure the property lines, really, and to open a public road. And it's because of the public road portion that we have this before the Planning Commission as a public hearing tonight. So this is the subdivision application map. So you see from the darker black lines, it is an odd shaped. I will turn on the pointer here. So one of the properties involved is this former lane here, and then the other lands involve. This was another property currently right now, and this is another part of a larger property running east-west as well. So if I put on the next slide here, this will show how these lands will be reconfigured. So the blue outline here represents one of the new proposed or reconfigured properties that will continue to exist. This portion of the closed lane will be consolidated and sold off to the current owner of this property to the west along 21st Street. So that will be the combined new property there. And then on the east here, we will be extending 20th Street right-of-way northwards. And there won't be any construction of the street per se until there's an opportunity for us to link it further north in the future sometime to the new Pacific Avenue being extended west of 18th Street. So in our analysis, with respect to the development plan, it is in the residential area, and the subdivision is not creating new lots, but is just extending an existing public road. We believe that this provides greater community benefits by granting a portion of 1820 Pacific Avenue a frontage, which currently it is technically landlocked right now. By providing frontage, it enables the subdivision of the remainder of the property if further development opportunities arise. Also, with respect to the zoning bylaw, the proposed subdivision will maintain existing buildings but not add new buildings or structures on these sites. The only change resulting from this application is really the extension of the 20th Street right-of-way, which does not affect existing zoning. Based on comments received, we will be warranting a development agreement. So highlights of provisions to be in the agreement include that the city will not maintain the newly opened portion of 20th Street until it has been developed to an urban cross-section. General public will still be able to use that newly portioned 20th Street for vehicle turnaround purposes, as it is still a dead-end street, and that an easement is required for overland storm drainage purposes, as well as for existing public underground storm sewer drainage pipes. Other conditions that we are recommending as well is that the property owner of 22 on 20th Street enters into a right of use agreement with Central Gas Manitoba. This is requested of Manitoba Hydro. As for public outreach, the applicant mailed out to surrounding property owners to collect feedback. And as of closing today, we did not receive any representation in favor or in opposition. Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, do you have any questions for administration? Commissioner?
Through you to Mr. Mock, Mr. Chair, one of the drawings that you had up there on the screen showed not only the parcel E of the proposed subdivision, which is the north-south lane to be closed, it also showed the east-west lane to the north of, I believe it is 25 21st Street, which is showing already closed by an instrument some years ago. That is included in this proposal? Or did I misunderstand that drawing? There was one with red on it?
Yeah, let me open that back up. I may have misdrawn that one. But the intent, through the chair to Commissioner Masher, is for that north-south portion of the former lane between 20th and 21st Street, the intent is to transfer ownership of that portion to the existing property on 21st Street for their ownership, yes.
Just the north-south?
Yes, that's just the north-south portion, yes.
And through Mr. Chair to Mr. Mock, you had clarified for me that 21st Street, north of this east-west public lane, is in fact closed. I'm just curious about that closure, or is there any plan to ever reopen that, or what?
Through the chair to Commissioner Masher, we are aware that portion of the street was legally closed for some reason decades ago, like well before our time. But at the same time, though, the facilities exist there. Had it not been for this map, people would have assumed that it's been still an active street, and the facilities are still there right now. It is still under city ownership, so given that it is our facilities there, we have not raised any concerns in terms of the existing property owners continue to have access through there. But we did raise this issue about, in the long term, to consider reopening it just to clean things up as well. So, but we do have a long list of properties to clean up across the city. So.
I'm sure. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, certainly.
Chair to Mr. Mock. Is the BU building there still used?
Sorry, through the chair, could you say again, please, Ms.?
Is the BU building there still used?
As of right now, if I recall correctly, it is sitting vacant at this time, or at least it was used by a business at one point. But in fairness, I don't believe I have the latest status update on that building.
So would it be, if it's not used, would it be coming down?
We are not aware of any plans of the building being taken down, through the chair to Commissioner Anderson.
But the university owns that land that it's on?
Through the chair, no. The
Oh.
university does not own that. No, it has not been under university ownership for several years at least.
Does the city own that land?
The city owns the northern portion right now of that blue
Okay.
piece of area, so
Yeah.
that is why the city is named as one of the property owners.
Okay.
But the southern portion, no, that has been in private ownership all this time.
Any other questions? Perhaps we'll now hear from the applicant if we have them available. Mr. Kuljak?
No, he's not present.
Okay.
Not that I could see as a participant.
And that we have nobody else, either in opposition or in...
Not for this application.
Commissioners, do you wish to move on without having had a presentation from the applicant?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm fine with it.
And if that's the case, do you have any other questions for administration? And we have no other public inputs coming, so I would entertain the question around ending the public hearing. Can I have that? Commissioner Hill?
That the public hearings for subdivision at 22 20th Street be concluded.
Seconder, Commissioner Major. All those in favor? So the public hearing portion is closed. Now our motion on the application. Oh, sorry, Lisa.
That the Planning Commission recommends Brandon City Council approve the application to subdivide 22 20th Street, 21 21st Street, and 1820 Pacific Avenue, and open a public road in the industrial restricted and residential low-density zones subject to 1 through 2. And that the administration be authorized to prepare a development agreement containing all conditions and requirements to protect the city's interest in accordance with any procedures, policies, bylaws, and acts.
Thank you. Seconder for the motion, Commissioner Robson. Do you wish to comment, Commissioner?
They're simply just wanting to subdivide this area. Nothing seems to be changing at this time. It's a very reasonable request in this particular area. So,
any other comments on this, Commissioner Major?
Personally, I'm supportive of it mainly because of the fact that it cleans up an area that is in a bit of a disarray at this point. You know, between the road being closed and lanes that are probably not developed or used, it just makes sense to do it.
Yeah, I agree. With no other comments, we'll call the question. All those in favor? It's unanimous.
may I point out, just in case, the number 2, there's that typo of the double planning commission.
Right. The first line.
Oh, okay.
Excellent. So we'll move on then to our third item, the bylaw regarding the Southeast Brandon Secondary Plan. We have a presentation from administration.
Yes, so for that, we'll call Ryan Nickel to speak to it.
Do you want me to go to the front or from here?
You can speak from there.
Yes, we've set up the camera from there.
We're just waiting for the slides to come up on view.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the Planning Commission and those listening online. The item before you today is the Southeast Brandon Secondary Plan. Next slide. So the context map is the southeast area, go figure, is in the southeast area of the city, to the east of First Street, to the north of Patricia, and south of Richmond Avenue. So just a quick background on secondary plans. Secondary plans is a policy framework that the municipality, so in this case the city, does for a development area. Typically we have secondary plans for all our new growth areas, and those could be areas at the edge of the city for greenfield growth, so that's new roads, new pipes, new green spaces, or in existing areas like a downtown area that's undergoing some more significant change. It's important to note that a secondary plan is not a legislated requirement. The city does not have to have secondary plans. It's not required by the province. This is something that we do because we feel this will lead to better planning of our areas and better neighborhoods for our residents. So this has been quite a process, and I know some of those listening online have kind of followed it through. We've been on the go here since 2009, where we started the process, and it's gone through some pretty significant delays because there's some pretty significant constraints or opportunities. It depends on your perspective when we're looking at this area, one of which is the White Ladies Slipper Orchid. So we started the process. We did a few different open houses. We learned some new things. We worked through the process, proposed some revisions. We did some more recent outreach with some online engagement, which certainly has its limitations, just like today's Planning Commission hearing. We made some more tweaks, and now we're here today. And I think I jumped this slide because this is probably some of the stuff I just said, but the important part of the history here, and I just want to note, and this is not new for most of the people here, but regarding the White Lady Slipper, the City of Brandon has been working actively with the province of Manitoba, as well as the Nature Conservancy of Canada and the property owner to define the area for the White Lady Slipper Preserve. So that's the area that's being included on the secondary plan, and that was the area that was included when we did the engagement of March 2021. In terms of what we heard, this is a massive oversimplification, but that's just the way it is with PowerPoint slides. The White Lady Slipper Orchid is a concern. It's a concern because there was feedback based on the area. There's different buffers that are referenced by different levels of government, where the federal government has a standard they like to see, the province has a standard that they like to see. Ultimately, we've been in contact with both the federal government and the province, and it's our understanding that both groups are satisfied with the buffer that's being proposed to date. There were concerns about the drainage in the area. So the drainage, as most folks know, there's a pond to the west that is currently piped or pumped into a ditch because it doesn't have a formalized outlet. So that's a big part of this plan is to formalize that outlet and solve that problem, as well as ensuring that there's proper flows that go to the endangered species, and that would be in consultation with the provincial regulator. This map shows the mix of land uses in the area. When we're looking at the map, it's important to remember that it's a secondary plan map, so it's really general. It's general because it's deliberately done that way because it's a vision. It's a vision for an area. It's not typically what we're used to seeing, which is detailed roads and lots, which is what actually gets developed. This is at a higher level than that. So the reason why we do these secondary plans is to show the main connections and the main land uses, understanding that these blobs are going to shift and move over time as we do more detailed planning with the private property owners, and that's super normal and typical. In fact, we expect it. I always get nervous when we put little dots on maps because they never seem to be in the right place for people, but I assure people listening that usually they don't end up in that identical place anyways. They always move a little bit around. It's just meant to show conceptually where you could see some of the higher density sites on the property, which would be focused on First Street and along the internal collector road. It shows the green spaces, which are supposed to be centrally located, accessible within walking distance from the residents, and the roads through that area. This is just a slide that shows some visual examples. Low density areas can include a mixture of single detached, semi-detached, so that's when you share the wall with your neighbor, and row housing. And row housing, generally that's where we see those groups of 4 in a row. Moderate density is typically where we see multi-story apartment style buildings. So the one that the Planning Commission just considered for the downtown could be something you see in an RMD zone, or you could see larger buildings all the way up to typically 32 unit buildings. So some more significant density. And we're hoping to see some opportunities for mixed use along First Street by providing that option, where we could see some residential moderate density with the commercial on the first floor to provide amenities for the residents in the area. These are just some more visual slides of some of the different land uses that are already existing or the residents could expect to see. From a transportation perspective, it's fairly straightforward. The idea is to have Maryland connect through, is the main internal collector road. So that means that that's kind of the main road that will collect the traffic from all the local roads and move it out to either First Street or Richmond, as well as the other main stubs would be connecting at Aberdeen to the north there, or with, I think that's the loading zone for the school to the south. It looks a little bit like a curvy worm, and that's deliberate because the engineering folks don't like cross-cutting traffic, and they want the majority of the traffic to stay on the arterial routes. So if you make it too convenient to drive through a neighborhood, people are concerned that it will increase traffic, and then residents won't be happy because it'll be too busy for a residential street. So there's pros and cons to either approach, and that's why we're going with this a little bit indirect approach. A big item in the secondary plan that we're really trying to promote, and I think the developers and the community have embraced, is connectivity through multi-use pathways. So that's what shows. It's hard to see on this map probably online, but there's those little dotted orange lines that show connections. And the idea there is to provide connections throughout the plan area to all the green spaces and the moderate density sites so people can move freely on their bikes or other active transportation methods through the area. Drainage is a big component, as we mentioned before. The city's been without an outlet for this pond for many years, and it's a source of frustration for area residents, and we're hoping to get the first stages going. We always say it's this year, and then it seems to never be. So I don't want to say this year, because then people will just say, why didn't you do it this year? You said you were going to do it, but it is happening. We're just trying to line up the project. And it's a challenging project because of all the different regulatory approvals. The one is trying to determine the right amount of water that needs to be maintained, or the flow that would need to be maintained through the White Ladies Slipper Preserve area. And we need guidance from the provinces there, the regulator, in that regard. And then the other piece is the alignment, which is challenging because the city doesn't own a lot of the land, but we do have entitlement to use former rights-of-ways for infrastructure purposes, which is why it looks kind of boxy. It's not ideal, but it's what we have entitlement to do to get through the area. Ultimately, the goal is to have that land, the water discharge into the river to the north, and there should be a significant benefit to other residents existing in the area, as it will take some of the pressure off of that existing drainage infrastructure. This map doesn't look very exciting, but what it shows is the lift station next to the Crocus Plains retention pond. Domestic sewer, so that's wastewater, is a significant constraint to this area, because at some point in time that First Street lift station will reach capacity, and then there needs to be a new route. There's multiple options being explored right now. We're hoping to update the secondary plan at some point in time to show what that would be. It would either be a gravity system going through the plan area to the pretreatment on Victoria, or it would be twinning of the existing wastewater line up First Street. Both have their pros and cons, and we'll come back with some recommendations. As of now, we're doing some modeling to confirm the amount of flows that can go to that First Street lift station. We do know there's enough capacity to do a few phases of development, but at some point in time there will be triggers that require these other larger scale improvements to take place. So the item of discussion, and I think for most attendees, will be the White Lady Slipper Orchid area. That certainly was the discussion when we ran those last webinars. And I'm sure people are sick of hearing me say this, but it's the jurisdiction of the province. It's legislation under provincial acts where the province is the approval authority. So when we're talking as the city's authority, our job is to ensure that the province's expectations are met and addressed as we go through our larger planning process. It's not our job to approve the area, because it's the province at their level that are telling us that this is the area that's being approved, and then providing us recommendations on what we need to do with land development to ensure the impacts are mitigated. The reality is we have nobody on staff that's specialized in environmental analysis, because it's not an area of our jurisdiction. There are, I'd say, valid points brought up that hydrology certainly impacts areas. And I know the NCC's been working with our engineering crew on the outflow, as well as they provide us stewardship plan to the province. So we've received a lot of feedback regarding the preserve, but ultimately the authority lies with the provincial government. In this area, the city's been a significant partner in trying to move this forward. We are a partner in a memorandum of understanding with the NCC and the owner. Originally, there was a decision through the province to approve a much smaller area, and we've actively worked with the province, and I have had a conversation with the federal regulator as well about this larger area. And although I know there's a lot of different perspectives, for the most part, they see this as a significant improvement to protecting the species. One aspect that I don't want to get into a detailed discussion, but I know will come up, is the reality that there was a portion of the city-owned land that was tilled, and there was a press release made by the city in that regard, providing the information on the tilling, and that the provincial regulator was notified, and they were doing the follow-up on what was the remediation that was required. So that's not the role of a secondary plan, is to get into the detail on a provincial enforcement issue or the decision of the province in that regard. From a city perspective, there was a requirement through the province to plant native grasses. We've been to the site. I understand it doesn't look great right now. We took some photos. So certainly there was an impact, but once again, that's outside the scope of what the Planning Commission is looking at today. On the implementation side of things, and this is the last slide, and I'll be quiet, we know we have some work to do regarding the servicing studies. We need to do better modeling of water and wastewater to have an understanding. If timing works out, we'll have those studies completed, then we'll bring them to council later in the process. If not, we'll be at this again. There needs to be a lot more detailed planning at the neighborhood planning stage in the subdivision rezoning. And often I find with planning, when people have concerns, they always bring their concerns up at whatever time in the process, and I think that's super okay. But often their concerns are with the development of the land. And this is approving the vision for the area. It's not approving development on the land. The development on the land is approved through the subdivision and rezoning. So the rezoning of the property is what provides the entitlement, and the subdivision is how the ownership breaks up. So those are the two triggers that lead to shovels getting put in ground and seeing development occur. So when we're talking about requirements at different stages of the process, there's different items that you typically look at different stages. So typically, one of the items that gets brought up is like geotechnical work, which you look into to ensure the different layers of the soil, as well as looking at considerations such as water table, which has been brought up with one of these letters, is a legitimate ask, and typically that's done by a developer as part of the subdivision rezoning prior to their development on the property. So when they're putting forward the designs for their buildings, they're taking this into consideration, as well as the city's work that we're doing designing the drainage system through that area would involve groundwater testing and analysis to make sure that we're designing the infrastructure properly to go through the area. It's typically not done to do testing for an entire secondary plan area. Often we're dealing, in this case, with a significant amount of land right at the secondary plan stage, and the plan builds out sometimes over 15 to 20 years, so that's deferred to a later stage as the developers move forward with the different stages and phases of development. There were 2 letters that were received, and I almost forgot prior to the hearing, and I'm sure those speakers can speak to their letters, but I just want to make sure that we got at least a few of the key points for the record, and if I missed something or I misinterpreted something, I would just invite those speakers to come and bring their thoughts forward. One of the letters here was received from the Age Friendly Committee, and who submitted the letter was Nancy McPherson, co-chair, and Susan Boychuk, board member. And we did just receive this letter today. which too bad we couldn't get it a little bit sooner, because I think there's some good stuff in that letter that we could incorporate, and I think we still can. But it's about including a lot of age-friendly ideas and principles in the plan, and perhaps being a little bit more finite about those ideas. The first general idea is the community gardens, and ensuring that community gardens are included in the secondary plan as a requirement. Certainly, community gardens are something that we encourage in all areas of the city, and we're seeing a lot more uptake, especially on some multi-unit sites where developers are putting them in as amenities already, and that's working quite well, and we want to see that happen. On some of the policy changes about the residential moderate density sites and making it a requirement, I would be hesitant to do that just because when we're working with developers, often the type of multi-unit has a different target market, where in some cases you're targeting families, or in some cases you're targeting seniors. So we tried to provide them the flexibility to provide different amenities that appeal to their user group. So for example, Brandon Avenue, they put up community gardens that work for their use, where other sites they put up little playground areas that works for their target audience to provide amenities. Planning department certainly agrees that a variety of amenities need to be provided in all neighborhoods for all user groups. That makes a ton of sense. And I think that's something that we could take back and look into that to see if there's some tweaking we could do to the policies. Just going through just a few of the other key ideas, just so I don't make sure I miss anything. I think the rest of the letter was focused on being barrier-free and including the proper language to ensure that's a consideration in the Southeast Secondary Plan, and then hopefully in the future all city plans that we're working on. Without taking too much time on this, I did look at it and have some ideas if the Commission's interested on some changes you could make right now, as well as some ideas that staff could take away from as a result of this hearing, just to make sure there's some takeaway here and we're moving forward with some of these ideas. The next letter was from Dr. Jillian Richards, and it was regarding the White Lady Slipper Orchid. And the concerns listed was regarding the water table and the shallow water table, and that it's identified in some areas as shallow as only 1 foot deep. There's a discussion about the site being largely boggy, low-lying area, not suitable for development, that the buffer does not meet the federal requirement, and more hydrological work is needed prior to approving the secondary plan. I think there's a lot of good information there, but those were the key points. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, do you have any questions? Commissioner Muir.
I have a couple through the chair to Mr. Nicol. You brought up a point from Dr. Richards' presentation that I was curious about. She mentions that the federal suggestion is a 300-meter buffer, and in her information, she says it's down to approximately 50. Is that, you mentioned earlier that you've been in consultation with the province and the federal government in regards to this. Is the 50 meters acceptable to both of those entities in regards to setbacks or?
Yeah, through the chair to the commissioner, the area as identified, to my understanding, has been reviewed at both the provincial and federal level, and it's acceptable to provide the required buffer.
Great, thank you. And the second question through the chair to Mr. Nicol. In the age-friendly groups presentation, they mentioned, and I don't have it in front of me, but they mentioned about non-slip sidewalks, roll curbs, and sidewalks wide enough for wheelchairs. I'm I'm hoping that you can explain to me or give me some idea about a non-slip sidewalk. I'm trying to figure out in Manitoba in January what is there a material that is available, or am I?
Yeah, through the chair to the commissioner, when I was reading the letter, my interpretation was it had to do with the slope of the sidewalk. And then in some cases, so for example, the side slope was a little bit too steep, and that some residents were having trouble staying balanced on the sidewalk just because it wasn't a flat surface.
Okay, great. I had seen that also, but I wasn't sure whether both correlated together. The other thing I guess I was wondering about, they mentioned about what I would consider roll curb. I wasn't sure whether they meant that everywhere or just at intersections for more mobility access.
Yeah, through the chair to the commissioner, I think there needs to be a fault discussion with ourselves and the age-friendly group on some of these items just to get clarity, and I think that'll be our next step following this meeting, just to see if we can capture some of them, because a lot of the feedback is good feedback, it's just not secondary plan, where it's dealing more with city engineering standards, and that's important, but perhaps not something we can include as a policy in the secondary plan.
And one last one through Mr. Chair to Mr. Nicol. I noticed on one of the drawings that you had, the multimodal transportation, there is a proposed traffic signal at Elderwood Drive and Richmond Avenue, but just a pedestrian crossing that may include crossing signals at Maryland and the proposed the extension of Maryland into the new subdivision. I'm just curious, would traffic signals with Crocus Plains right there, would traffic signals not be advantageous there, or?
Yeah, through the chair to the commissioner, at Maryland and First, what's proposed is a roundabout. So there would be a traffic.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
A
Thank
traffic
you.
facility, yeah.
Sorry, I missed the black circle. Thank you very much.
Whereas-
No, that's great.
Any other questions from the commissioners? Commissioner Anderson?
Through the chair. Will Zenith be moving their asphalt plant if we're going to be opening this secondary vision for, let's say, housing? Is there word of them moving it over to Cumming and Dobies, or are they going to just stay where they are, or?
Yeah, through the chair to the commissioner, I don't want to speak too much about, I think their plans are their plans, but they can stay at the current location as long as they want. Like from a planning perspective, they're lawfully non-conforming. I know we've been working with them, as we do many other owners of kind of lawfully non-conforming properties in the city to look at moves, and hopefully they do at some point in time, but they could be there for as many years as they want.
Similar to Cascades.
Correct.
Right. Okay. Another thing, when we're talking about the water and drainage, like I know the lift station is there, so is it sufficient enough for another development over in that other corner? Or like lots of times we've been getting oversized pipes for these developers to put in to carry away the water. Is that the case, or?
Yeah, through the chair to Commissioner Anderson, in short, the lift station is not sufficient to accommodate all these different growth areas because all the growth in the south area of the city ends up in the same spot. So whether it's development in Brookwood or Bellafield or this area, it's all going to that same lift station. So at some point in time, it's going to reach its potential, and we're going to have to look at another big ticket item. But that will last for, I think is projected, at least 5 years.
That's not very long.
Yeah, things go fast. And then we're going to start the next big project, which is putting a whole new line to the pretreatment facility, or twinning up First Street, one or the other.
Would they have to have a retention pond in that area also, or we're trying to get away from that, or?
Oh, yes, sorry, yeah, through the chair. The first question was about wastewater, the second here is drainage. So each of these areas would have to store their water on their properties. We got away from putting blue dots on people's properties because they were always seemingly in the wrong location, and then people always like, well, your blue dot's there and it needs to be up here. So we just call them catchment areas now. So everyone's responsible for storing water in their catchment area, and through their more detailed design, they can determine what's the best location to do that.
Thank you. Any further questions for administration? Perhaps later. So we don't really have an applicant. Do we have anyone speaking in favor of the plan, or are we just go through them in whatever order is convenient to bring them up and then determine their intent? Amber, I was looking a bit to you to just to guide me there.
Asking them.
Excellent. Yeah. Normally we hear people speaking in favor of and then in opposition to and then seeking more information, but we realize that the online environment doesn't make it quite as straightforward.
Does this have to go to council first to get approved and then back to us?
Through the chair to Commissioner Anderson, yes, because this is a bylaw. So just like a rezoning process, council makes the final decision in the end.
Okay, now.
So the Planning Commission, again, to inform those listening in while we're waiting, Planning Commission tonight will, if possible, they will make a recommendation tonight to council, and then council will debate further and make their decision accordingly at a later date.
And then give us the revised whatever they've decided on, and then we can decide.
Through the chair to Commissioner Anderson, if council directs administration to amend the plan further before they approve it, then we will do so accordingly.
Okay, thank you.
And if it is approved, the subsequent subdivision and neighborhood plans and everything else may still very well come back through us depending on their nature. As Mr. Ryan was saying, this is at a very high level, and a lot of the detail that we're used to dealing with will come through those later applications. Yeah.
Mr. Chair, yes, you are correct. Afterwards, if someone is ready to apply for rezoning a subdivision, yes, the Planning Commission must hold public hearings for those applications as well.
Right, so
Thank
I have
you.
no one in favor, but I have people in line in opposition.
All right.
All right, so we will go to Susan first, who will be speaking in opposition. If you could mute your mic, Susan? No, you're still muted.
Ms. Boychuk, you're still on mute. Either that or we can't hear you. I'm sorry, I don't know if it's at your end or not, but it seems to be.
Next to her name.
My apologies for this delay, but we still can't hear you.
This is Nancy McPherson speaking. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Ms. McPherson. How are you?
I am here with Susan Boychuk. I am not clear on this process at all. Are we Are we speaking to our opposition with the presentation that we prepared, or are we merely answering questions?
It's an opportunity for you to raise your concerns, however you wish to raise them, and if we have questions of you, we can ask you to be clear on those.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I've got myself delayed coming back afterwards, so I am just going to speak, and you can shut me off whenever it's done, because I can't follow the two presentations. On behalf of the Age-Friendly Committee of Council, we would like to thank you for allowing us this time to make a presentation. As I said, I am Nancy McPherson, co-chair of the committee, and Susan Boychuk, a board member, is also here. We provided the complete report to the planning department for distribution to the commission, but in respect for time tonight, we are going to just proceed with some highlights and an overview of the report. I think it's important as a brief background here to understand that the Age-Friendly Brandon stems from the Age-Friendly Cities and Communities Initiative that was launched by the World Health Organization in 2006. The intent was to promote social participation, health, and security for people of all ages. The Government of Canada partnered with the province and territories to create a pan-Canadian age-friendly community network, and the City of Brandon joined that network in 2008. In 2012, a steering committee was formed that consisted of city management and citizen representatives that completed a comprehensive assessment examining the age-friendliness of our city, and based on that assessment, the Age-Friendly Committee of Council was established in June 2013. So we appreciate that age-friendly principles must be adopted on a citywide basis, and in relation to planning and development, we will have that opportunity with the commencement of the 2022 Development Plan Review. But in the interim, we must take the opportunity to contribute to work that is in progress, and that brings us to where we are today. We commend the work that has been completed over the last several years in relation to this plan. However, we are here to provide an objection in relation to two specific areas: green space location and designated use, and documented commitment to age-friendly design concepts. So in area number 1, the green space location and designated use, in 2019, the plan was presented at a community open house depicting green space that was shown on the map. The city public engagement report for this open house denotes that the following feedback was received. There needs to be more green spaces, parks for children and tennis courts, that we need green spaces closer to schools, and community gardens are desired in the area. So if we fast forward to 2021 and we don't see any change in the representation of leisure green space on the plan map. In addition, we've realized one of the lessons of COVID-19 has shown cities could become a lot more than they are right now: more livable, more sustainable, more resilient, and more equitable. Throughout the duration of the pandemic, various activities have grown in popularity, including gardening. The many benefits of garden spaces are well documented, and community interest is evident by the many community gardens throughout the city. Another essential feature of an age-friendly community is promoting intergenerational activities, bringing together people from varying ages of 0 to 100. We have a unique opportunity available in the area of this plan because of the close proximity to Crocus Plains Regional Secondary High School. We are proposing the plan include the designation of community garden space and that this space be represented on the map within the leisure green space on the plan. Instead of the 2 leisure green space areas that are currently depicted in the illustration, we are requesting a 3rd site be designated in close proximity to First Street and adjacent to Crocus Plains High School, and in an area that would be of higher population density. This could result in a reduction in size of the other 2 sites or the redesignation of 1 site to the proposed location. The reasons we are objecting to the location of the existing 2 leisure green space areas is that the current locations do not provide connectivity to adjacent neighborhoods. And due to the phasing of development, these green spaces are being located within phase 2 and 3, development of which may not take place for 10 to possibly 20 plus years. The area recommended by H-Friendly Brandon is located within phase 1 of the proposed development pattern. Item 2.1.9 of Schedule A states, in accordance with the City of Brandon Urban and Landscape Design Standards Manual, residential moderate density sites should incorporate, amongst other requirements, common amenity areas, pedestrian connections, and buffers from low-density residential users. Examples of common amenity areas include, but are not limited to, play structures and community gardens. Our objection to item 2.1.9 is requesting strong wording to denote the commitment to achieve specified development goals. Using community gardens simply as an example of a common amenity does not reflect that commitment. Furthermore, semi-public green spaces present many limiting factors due to the nature of ownership. The developer maintains ownership of the land and maintenance of most of the green space amenities, therefore is generally the design lead. Due to these reasons, a greater need arises to incorporate the community garden designation into the plan, and more specifically, the composite map to better guide development. An interesting side note, in May 2021, the City of Winnipeg Standing Policy Committee on Property and Development, Heritage and Downtown Development held discussions to consider a policy to make the creation of community gardens mandatory in all new developments. Committee discussion grew from this, and the City of Winnipeg plans to create a policy to ensure community gardens exist in every neighborhood. It's an interesting concept. Area 2 is the documented commitment to age-friendly design concepts. The City of Brandon has made a commitment to the continuing development of an age-friendly community through the establishment of the Age-Friendly Committee of Council, and we must take this opportunity to contribute to all the work currently in progress and inject some of the age-friendly community principles into this secondary plan that is under review. Page 15 of Schedule A states, 3.2, active transportation policies. 3.2.7, all uses within the secondary plan area should provide convenient pedestrian access from developments to adjacent sidewalks and transit stops. And 3.2.8, pedestrian and cycling networks should be accessible for persons of all abilities. We would like to offer a story we previously shared with the senior planners regarding best laid plans that don't necessarily result in convenient pedestrian access and accessible for persons of all abilities, as noted in the policies within this plan. The newer portion of the neighborhood directly west of the secondary plan was built over the past 10 years, and construction continues as of today. Many people within the area walk on the streets instead of the sidewalks due to the slope of the sidewalks. In the months when ice is possible, maintaining balance on such sidewalks becomes very difficult. An individual that resides in the neighborhood that uses a wheelchair also has stated that negotiating the sidewalks is very challenging and generally must use the road instead. The sidewalks may be a benefit to enhance drainage, but they do not necessarily mean that they are, and I quote, convenient pedestrian access, end quote, and, quote, accessible for persons of all abilities, end quote. Our objection to these statements, 3.2.7 and 3.2.8, are that they are too vague and provide too much allowance of interpretation by the developer. The City of Brandon, in collaboration with developers, have the opportunity to resolve inequities amongst community residents. We request, at minimum, references throughout the plan should be to barrier-free access. Page 20 of Schedule A states 5.0 Urban Design, 5.1 General Policies. Development should support a highly walkable, pedestrian-oriented, transit-supportive, accessible community. And 5.1.2 states public and semi-public spaces in public and private developments should be designed as accessible spaces in accordance with the Accessibility for Manitobans Act and its associated regulations. In accordance with definitions provided on page 4 of Schedule A, our objection to item 5.1.1 and 5.1.2 is that the word should is too passive, and we request the word shall or will be used to ensure compliance to acts and associated regulations as in the Accessibility for Manitobans Act. And finally, page 4 of Schedule 8 states various 1.5 governing provisions. Our objection to item 1.5 and 1.5.6 is to have the Accessibility for Manitobans Act listed as a governing provision to ensure adequate focus is brought to the Act and thereby to addressing some of the age-friendly principles as presented. We believe this is an excellent interim approach prior to the adoption of an updated development plan and providing adequate understanding of expectations to any potential development within the plan area. Thank you on behalf of the Age-Friendly Committee of Council.
Thank you, and I would note that I sort of gave you both your and Ms. Boychuk's time, the 10 minutes instead of just 5, to get all those points across. Thank you very much. Again, the Commission can present some of those ideas to the Council, but the Council officers have also heard that feedback as well. The only thing that I would just like to remind everyone again is, Mr. Nichols said earlier, things like the maps are not intended to show the specific location of future developments. Things are meant to be indicative of potential developments rather than indicating exactly where things may lie. So again, there's lots of opportunities in the future as subdivision and development plans come forward at that more detailed level to continue to pursue the age-friendly agenda. Administration, did you want to have anything to add or recommendations that you would think?
Just through the chair, and I can bring them up if that's okay, because we didn't have a lot of time, but I did do a review, and certainly I think some of the points are completely valid, and they're changes that are relatively minor and make some sense. Changing the should to a shall in terms of the overall mandate, administration is fine with. Typically, we like the word should when we look at design because there always seems to be an exception because of some topography or some reason where it's not possible. But in this case, it's more just it shall committing to do this. So that seems to make some sense. 3.2.7 and 3.2.8 to include reference to barrier free to provide clarity instead of maybe using the word accessible. We also have no concerns with if that's a change that the Commission would like to recommend to Council. Providing reference to the Accessibility for Manitobans Act seems like a good idea, and we'll certainly put it more on the forefront when we're going through our planning processes. The one at community gardens is a little bit trickier. Big fan of community gardens. I think they should be everywhere in new neighborhoods. I was trying to write out a policy, but I couldn't do it before the meeting. It just didn't seem to work for me. So if that was something that the committee thought was important, which I think you should, is that the recommendation would be to just kind of give staff some work to take it away and propose something for City Council on how to ensure that there's some form of community garden on public property in this area. So I have some of those here. We don't need to. I know you have lots of other folks, but I'll bring it up when you're going through your conversations, Mr. Chair.
Yes, thank you. And as you said earlier, sometimes looking at one secondary plan raises issues that are really citywide. So that's excellent. Thank you. So we will continue on then. Do we have another person?
We have another person. David Troop is online, and he is wanting to speak in opposition.
Thank you.
Hello?
Mr. Troop, yes.
Yeah, okay. I think as you're aware that this particular site has quite high groundwater. 1 to 3 feet below ground is certainly quite a bit higher than your average basement. This presents quite an issue for development here. I don't think it's really possible to even put houses on there without causing serious problems with foundations and leakage, unless you start draining the whole property, and how easily it can be drained is a big issue. You have groundwater, and that groundwater is going to keep coming in and keep coming in. I mean, if you are successful in draining that groundwater, I've kind of run some calculations, and it looks like that the effect of that would extend, about 100 meters into the ecological preserve. So if you're doing that, then, you're destroying the habitat for the orchids, which is the whole point that it's there. So you can't just drain, the place where the houses are without draining the surrounding land. And so, you can say, well, this is our general plan for the area, but I would be rather shocked if you had, anything other than houses where you say there's going to be houses. And the reserve can't really accommodate that far of an intrusion into it of lowering the water level. So I don't really see how this plan is feasible. I mean, you're looking at if you don't drain, then you're doing a real disservice to the people of Brandon who are buying these houses, because they're going to have serious problems with their foundations. I mean, the geotechnical report that we saw, it shows that there's corrosion to concrete, there's unstable foundations, and basically water leaking in. And, I would really hope that if the city, if it was, if I was one of these people potentially buying the houses, that the city would be able to stand up as a consumer protector for the people in the city, and not end up selling people a problem. And, you can kind of say, well, this is just a general plan, but, the plan is to put houses in there. And I think it's a very serious issue that needs to be addressed before, anything gets going. It affects the area of development, it affects the area around it. And, it's just, it could just turn into a real disaster area for everyone involved. I mean, in terms of what you want to do to drain the area, I'm just thinking, this water table, it's well above the level of any of the storm sewers. So are you going to use storm sewers to drain away the water in the area? I'm just wondering whether that's appropriate to use city storm sewers to drain away groundwater. But we've had this whole thing go ahead without any scientific studies at all, or engineering studies to say, what are the effects of all of this? Even if it's just a big picture. Like if you want to do it piecemeal, you can kind of work around that. But, just doing a piecemeal project, this is a big plan. This is a big area. And this is the plan that we're looking at right now. And, the fact is, you're going to try and drain it. So maybe you should be looking at it now, not saying, well, we'll build a cluster of houses here or over there, and we'll deal with it then. And I would also say that within the planning, the Brandon and Area Planning District Development Plan, it does say that before you are there is a policy there that says where undeveloped areas in Brandon are being developed, a special drainage study and storm drainage plan shall be provided, showing the expected impact of the existing drainage systems and surrounding properties. So that's within the city's own policy, and I'm wondering whether you're going to go ahead with that or whether just ignore all of that. I think in addition, from the same Planning Act, it says that where the board or council considers appropriate, a developer may be required to submit special studies to review, and this applies to areas, that have unusual construction requirements, which would definitely apply to here, and also with environmental impacts. So I think, going ahead and approving this plan, it's going ahead way too early without considering the consequences.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you have anything to add beyond the groundwater, that main concern? Right. Administration, are you just going to keep taking notes as we go through these, perhaps, and then answer them generally at the end? Might be a
that'll help us keep
better
us
approach.
moving.
Yeah.
Yep.
So thank you again, Mr. Toop, and we'll look to see who we have next. We do have quite a list of people who've expressed an interest in speaking, so I do want to keep us moving along through them to give everyone a chance.
I don't see anybody else who's raised their hand that hasn't already spoke.
Okay. So again, I'll just, I don't know if the people who are on Teams are also watching the YouTube feed, but if you are and you do wish to make comments beyond what you may have already submitted in writing, please use the raise your hand feature within Teams so that we can know that you wish to address the commission.
Let's see, there's now. So Rick, were you wanting to speak in opposition or for information purposes only?
I would like to speak in opposition.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My main concern from looking through the Species at Risk Act federally, besides the fact that there's supposed to be a buffer of 300 meters minimum away from any endangered species, the Act also states that the ecosystem itself has to be protected. And that is determined by doing an environmental impact study on the affected species, in this case, the small white lady slipper. So I guess my question is, from what I've heard, you're saying that the federal and provincial government has more or less approved the numbers, that 50-meter buffer, and I'm wondering, where is the actual study that was done, and shouldn't it be a matter of public record? The other thing I'd like to point out is I believe there hasn't been an accurate count of the actual number of orchids in the area, at least not done recently. From everything that I can find, the last time something like that was done by somebody that knows what they're looking for was 1998. As such, under the Federal Species at Risk Act, it's illegal to damage, remove, or affect the ecosystem of even one orchid. So again, I'm wondering about when was the last count done and what kind of information. And that's about my end.
Thank you very much for raising that. We will, again, we're going to go through the rest of the public comments, and then we'll hear back from administration if any of these, such as if there have been more recent studies or not, can be answered. Do we have a...
I have another person here, Lauren.
Lauren Wilkin?
Yes. And Lauren, are you here to speak in opposition as well?
You may have to unmute if you... I don't know. Lauren? Ms. Wilkin? Can you hear us?
Yes. Well, I just have some questions. Okay, I'm unmuted on my side.
No, you're good.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so my question is regarding the buffer zone as well. Apparently, both the province and let's see, try this again. Now, can you hear me?
Yeah, we still can. Yes.
Okay. So, well, I just have some questions. Okay, sorry. I'm unmuted on my side. No, you're good. Hello?
Yes, we can hear you as well as something in your background.
My question is regarding the buffer zone.
Sure.
If both the province and the feds have signed off on a small buffer zone, could we see that in writing, please? Because it's very important. They're going against their own regulations. It doesn't make any sense to me. That's my first question. The second, actually, there's three. Second question is, with all of the other planning submissions that are always submitted to council, the owner is always indicated. In this case, the owner isn't, and I'm wondering why. The owner is never mentioned in anything, and I just find that really odd. And then my third question is, the city has said they're not responsible or will not take any action regarding the person or persons, whatever, that did till the land. Will they be looking to the province to pursue charges in this, or what will they be doing? Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you for offering that up. So we're just getting the next person lined up. Once again, thank all of you for putting up with the nature of this to fulfill our obligations to the current COVID regulations.
I have no other people who have raised their hand to speak
All right.
that haven't already spoken.
That haven't already spoken, yeah. All right. And nothing else has come in via other means since we've started?
No.
All right.
Did you want administration to answer those questions?
Yes, I could certainly do that. And then if anyone else pops their hand up that hasn't already spoken, then we can see. But do you have any answers to some of the well, let me just go through the ones I heard that I'd like to hear. Did you get anything regarding this idea of the federal provincial approvals that you've received? How would that normally be shared with the public?
Yeah, through the chair to the commission, it is a little bit of a tricky one because it's the ultimate authority, as we know, is the federal government, but the provincial government also has their legislation, and they're the ones who do the administering of it. So the federal government kind of is like this oversight body, making sure the province is doing the right things, just like they do with all the other provinces with endangered species. But when we're talking about approvals, the feds don't approve it. The feds are the oversight group, and the province are the ones that do the approvals. So if there's information that interested parties are looking for from the province in their role as the approval authority, those requests should go to the province, not to the city, because we're not the ones reviewing and approving these decisions on endangered species. A few of the other items brought up was the groundwater, and I haven't seen a geotechnical for this property, but I guess I'll assume what's being said is correct and factual, and certainly there's some challenges there. Saying that, I think groundwater does vary drastically throughout a property, which is why you look at it sometimes on a parcel by parcel basis. Typically, I do kind of like the overall approach, and I think that makes sense. But in this instance, the approach we'd like to stick with is still going through that, where the developers are required to provide those studies when they go through their subdivision and rezoning neighborhood plan applications. It was correctly said by the speaker that certainly council could require additional studies if that's what they were looking to do, but I think the intent of that clause in development plan also was when developers are getting entitlement to build on the property, not as much at the visionary stage that we're looking at today at a secondary plan. There was questions about, once again, the provincial process and environmental impact assessments. Once again, we're not the experts in that. We defer to the province. I'm like a broken recording that everyone's sick of hearing this, but I just keep on saying it because the province is the authority. My understanding, though, is that the Nature Conservancy did submit a stewardship and protection plan that was acceptable to the province, but once again, if there was information of people that were interested, that's the authority that the request should go for that information. The discussion about ownership was brought forward. I know it's a little bit confusing because typically when we're dealing with a request, we're dealing with it coming from a private property when we're looking to do something, where in this case it's administration bringing it forward to council for a city bylaw that covers multiple property owners. So that's why there's no reference to any specific property owners as part of this request. And the discussion around, once again, the charges and the process on enforcement is being dealt with through the provincial channels.
And as you said at the beginning, not really a matter that our commission can sort of weigh into.
No.
Thank you. Commissioners, did you have any questions for administration that maybe were raised by the speakers? Commissioner Hill?
Through the chair. I realize you touched on this. The one thing I want to clear up is this is obviously, this is the most contentious point, is this buffer zone, and, you know, why isn't it 300? Why isn't it 100? Why is it 50? And why was it approved? So I realize that while this was approved through the provincial government, I think the question is there something, obviously there's some document or some kind of communication where they said yes to this plan. And if that is the case, it seems that some of these folks want to know about this, want to see if it's public. That seems to be the concern. So if someone has said yes to this, which it seems that they have, because that's what we've been told, where is this sort of information without them having to go to the province, since obviously you've received it?
Yep, sorry, through the chair to the commissioner. I can certainly follow up with the province on this piece. I'm being a little bit careful about what we release and what we don't, but that's a fair request. But just to clarify, the information that we have received from the province was a minister's decision to approve a buffer area, and what I said was it was much smaller than this area. So this wasn't the area that was approved. The minister's decision to approve it was based on a different survey that was completed and included a much smaller 25-meter buffer and, if I recall, a total preserve area of 9 acres. Where the preserve, but of course, and rightfully so, what's been brought forward is that there were concerns at different levels to make sure, you know, it's a defensible decision, and that's why as a city we're bringing forward a recommendation here to designate an area that is significantly larger than the provincial minister's decision based on the feedback that we've received from provincial staff, discussions with some of the federal oversight staff to try to create an area that is more defensible and does provide a better preserve for the endangered species.
Any other questions for administration?
Through the chair to Mr. Nicol, along the same lines, but perhaps with a little bit different twist, I understand that it's not the city's jurisdiction. I understand that you're being very diplomatic and trying to answer questions that aren't really yours to answer. My question is it possible to provide interested parties with contacts at the province that may be able to give them more defined answers? If it's their responsibility, if it's a provincial responsibility, perhaps it's better that these individuals or groups go directly to the province.
Yeah, through the chair to Commissioner. Before I just throw out a contact information, I'll probably do a follow-up again with the province asking for some information. Once again, as you said, we're trying to be as diplomatic as we can. I have had multiple follow-ups looking for more confirmation of direction. I feel like we're a little bit not being completely left out of it, but perhaps not getting the support that's needed through a process, especially since the local engagement that we're getting, but I can certainly try again.
Thank you very much.
Other questions or anything else administration wants to add off the back?
No, Mr. Chair.
All right. And
I do have a question from one of the people who had cited their objection. They were wondering, they wanted to confirm that the city isn't planning to run drainage through this immediately. This would be something that would be coming later.
Andrew, could you pull up the map showing drainage? That might help.
Okay. Could we bring that up on the screen, please? Okay, we're starting to see it on our end, Ryan.
Yeah, I wish sorry, it's a completely fair question, and I wish this map showed the Lady Slipper Preserve. One of the items, though, that we did change as part of our design is we changed the network and pushed it further to the north. Originally, we did envision having that blue line that represents a pipe go directly to the east, which would have been further down, Andrew. Yeah, originally it was over there, which would have been directly to the north of the preserve. We had met with the province and talked to them, and they didn't want to see a road or a pipe that close to it. So that's why we moved it further north to provide a little bit more separation between the preserve area and the drainage channel. It is likely that construction hopefully will occur. We were hoping to see some construction this year. If not this year, it will hopefully be next year. And once again, one of the items that we do need to address is the flows and that would go into the Lady Slipper area. It's a very difficult exercise, as we found, to get confirmation from the province on what those flows should be. We're thinking it might have to be some sort of pump structure that we have where who's ever operating the preserve could just moderate the flows to however they want, because it seems to be it's going to be hard to get exact flow that could be diverted through the area.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Seeing David Troop was the one who asked that, so I'm just seeing he's typing.
Okay.
All right, my question is still whether this is something that will be voted on in a future meeting, as it doesn't seem like you've answered that part. Would this come back, the drainage, would it come back to council? No.
No, yeah, through the commissioner, like the drainage piece is a technical piece, capital project. It just would get built. It'd be approved by council as part of the capital budget, and then administration goes and designs and builds it.
If I can ask perhaps a follow-up then, but if a land owner came to subdivide or develop a piece of that property, they would then be providing, if necessary, drainage for their sites and things, right? We know from a past application that the pre-existing drainage versus the drainage that's going to happen after development is monitored.
Yeah, correct. So pre versus post would still apply. So if a developer is going to develop in that area, they would likely build their own retention pond to manage those flows from their property. And then there would be an outflow from their pond that would hook up to the larger city pipe, which is those lines that showed on the map.
Yeah.
And that's how the system would connect.
Right. And so that level of detail is not determined by this plan.
No, correct. That will be known once developers come in with their neighborhood plan subdivisions and rezoning, showing how they're going to plug their specific piece into the overall secondary plan puzzle.
Right.
Right. His other question would be is, before that drainage is put in, would an environmental assessment be done?
Through Chair, once again, broken record. It's up to the provincial regulator on what their requirements are for us to meet through the process, and the detail that they need. We'll provide whatever they require through that process.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. All right. Again, questions from the commissioners? No? Nothing else coming in?
Jillian Richards never spoke before, and they have their hand up.
All right.
You haven't closed your public hearing. Is that person able to speak?
I would. I see consent from the in nodding. And did we not have a letter from Jillian Richards?
Yes, that was one of the two we received today.
Right. That was somewhat addressed in the opening statements, but certainly I'm happy to have all the input we can get.
Jillian, if you'd like to unmute and then join the meeting.
Sure, thank you. I've got feedback here. Oh well, I'll just carry on and try and ignore myself. Did I understand correctly that Ryan said that construction of drainage might occur this year without any further approval by anybody?
No, I believe his point was that that this was just at a secondary plan level, and that we wouldn't be doing anything shovel in ground kind of work until later applications were made. But Mr. Nicol?
Just to confirm, and I know this is very confusing because this is a planned overall vision for the area, but the city doesn't have to rezone or subdivide property to construct drainage works.
True. Okay.
So that's not going through a rezoning entitlement process. So in that case, it gets approved in the capital budget, and there's no further approvals through a bylaw amendment. There would still be required approvals through the province, just like this for drainage works associated with the environmental component, as we talked about with the flows to the lady slippers.
Right. Thank you. And I think that's what we have. All right. I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing if the commission feels that we've had and given it ample time. Yeah. All right. Commissioner Hill, thank you.
That the public hearing for bylaw number 7302, Southeast Brandon Secondary Plan, be concluded.
Second by Commissioner Mayer. Let me just put that down myself here. All those in favor? So that's unanimous. All right. So then the next piece would be first having a motion regarding the application. Mr. Nicol has provided a few additional comments that we could add as like 3, 4, 5 as additional pieces. So up to the commissioners that wishes to make the motion if you want to see these while you make the motion, or whether you already have your own thoughts on the motion. Again, the motion that's presented to us in the agenda is simply a guide for us to use to our need. I'm sure the administration would like 1 and 2 to be included, but if you want to include any of these additional points, I could pass them on to whoever wants to make the motion.
Can you just read them out?
Sure. Okay. One would be around the governing provisions to include 1.5.6 with reference to the accessibilities for Manitoba Woods Act. I closed public hearing. We did. The second one would be that the administration for community gardens, administration review and provide recommendations for consideration for the City Council at the second reading on the policy options for the community gardens. The barrier-free access to amend 3.27 and 3.28 to include a reference to barrier-free access, and urban design amend 5.1.1 and 5.1.2 by changing the should to shall, which was largely addressing the issues raised by age-friendly group. And again, as always, if there are other comments that you wish to add into the motion, welcome to.
So by adding those to the list, what would that take that to? We're currently at 2. Would that make it? That
would, if we made governing 3, community gardens 4, barrier-free 5, and urban design 6.
Okay. All right.
And they're all fairly directive for us, directing the staff to actually do some work between now and the time it goes to. If we should be recommending it at this time. All right. Commissioner Hill?
That the Planning Commission recommends City Council approve bylaw number 7302 to adopt the Southeast Brandon Secondary Plan, subject to the following amendments, 1 through 6.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Commissioner Major. All right. Again, this is a recommendation to the City Council. Anything that we want to add or comment that they would like to take into thought while they're approving it?
I realize this is a big one, and I know a lot of people have a lot of concerns about this. I think the most important thing to stress is that, 1, we are simply making a recommendation to City Council, and 2, this is a secondary plan. I'm very confident that the city, much like they already have, will amend the plan and work with it as needed for drainage, for wastewater, for any kind of hydrology, and then concerns, and of course, the specifics over the orchids. This is very early steps of this, and so I feel overall this area is a good development where necessary for the city. So I think, I trust that major changes will be thought through, and that, this is going to be a collaborative effort. But again, this is a secondary plan, and we are simply doing our part to recommend this.
Mr. Chair, I find it difficult to believe that such a beautiful little flower can be so contentious. And it's, I want to thank everyone for their presentations and their concerns and their dedication to this. It's commendable. On the other side, I do feel somewhat sympathetic to city staff who are caught in between a rock and a hard place. This obviously is going to be coming back to council, and I would not be surprised if we didn't see it back on our agenda at some point in the future, which is still a good thing. All of this process seems very laborious, but I really do think there's some due course here that's it's in everybody's favor. So I'm in favor of this, but I'm sure we'll see it again.
Any other comments from the commissioners?
I'm in favor of this. There was lots of concerns brought forward from the public, which is good. And so our council will look at that. And I think it also, whoever the owner is and how they develop it will play a major role in it also. But it is up to council to figure out what is best for the community, I think. So I'm in favor of this.
Yes, and I would like to also thank everybody who participated by either writing letters or speaking this evening. Again, we've heard all of your concerns. Unfortunately, some of those concerns don't fall within our purview, but we still hear them. The administration still hears them, so it is useful. And we have, through some of the amendments we made to the original motion, have included a number of, I think, very important issues, especially around the age-friendly letters. So that was excellent. Thank you, commissioners. Can I call the question in favor of this motion? That's unanimous.
Before we disconnect, if I may add as information to the general public tuning in.
Sure.
So thank you, everyone, once again, on behalf of administration for your feedback. It was helpful and important for us to hear it, as the chair pointed out. So the next step for us, as directed by or as recommended by the Planning Commission, is for city staff to further make amendments to this draft secondary plan before we take it to council. Given the schedule of council meetings, therefore, the absolute earliest we could take it back to council will be in July. They have one meeting scheduled for the 12th. That is the absolute earliest we could bring it back. But that will be our target to keep things moving along. So, but again, thank you, everyone. So Mr. Chair, I hand it back to you.
Thank you. That brings us to the end of the public hearing portions of tonight's meeting. We'll be moving on to some general administrative business of the commission. So I will say good night and thank you again for your engagement.